talk a little bit more about FDIs in terms of what's ailing Indian FDI flows and whether or not we can see the long-term fundamentals intact or if whether or not there's a slowdown. Pranjul Bhandari is the chief economist India and Indonesia at HSBC and now joining us on the show. Thanks so much for taking the time out. Just going by the latest reports, can you give us a sense as to what the outlook is in particular when it comes to the overall FDI flows? Historically, what we have witnessed into India, what the last 4 quarters as well have reflected?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is a very interesting topic because, all around the world, there's a buzz about India on how India is growing. Its growth obviously has been stupendous over the last couple of quarters, and India is also gaining global market share in the trade of goods and services. So then it becomes a real mystery if you look at foreign direct investment into the economy and you notice that in the last 4 quarters, it's actually halved. It sort of just doesn't add up with the rest of the commentary we are getting on India on many other fronts. So, what's really going on there? And I think that's something that I've looked into in a lot of detail.
Yeah, and what are the key findings then, Pranjal? What explains that dichotomy? I mean, is it just flowing into certain sectors? What's the reason that we're not seeing the actual flows come in? While, of course, as you said, there's a lot of chatter across the world.
Yeah, so look, India's FDI rose, over the last 10 years and then dramatically in the pandemic period. And now it's halved, as I said. So what we do is we look at a lot of foreign investment intentions. You see, corporates, they talk about their expectations and their intention to invest, and then the investment happens. So we track the very early data, the intention data, and we find that there's a huge shift going on, a shifting of frontiers in the background. So when FDI really rose in the pandemic period and we were getting $555 billion of FDI per year, it was a lot of pandemic heavy sectors like computers, electronics, chemicals, drugs, and pharmaceuticals. But that era is now over. If I look at intentions data, there's a huge shift happening from pandemic to futuristic sectors like AI, EVs, green hydrogen, renewables, data centers, and things like that. So we're seeing a huge shifting of frontiers that is going on. But because these are new sectors, things like AI and EVs, it takes time, for the money to really flow in, and that I think is what's causing the delay. In the past, whenever we've grappled with new sectors, it takes about 2 years. And my sense is this is that 2 year period we are going through where these sectors are getting ready to welcome new FDI. My sense is a new FDI wave could begin, but it'll take about a year. But when it does begin, FDI inflows will double. It's fallen to about $27 billion right now. It'll go back to $55 billion a year, which is what we had seen at the peak during the pandemic.
I wanted to understand from you as well. I know you spoke about the individual sectors, but how are you looking at the futuristic sectors bringing, an ease of business and a new wave of FDI flows? If you could just characterize a little bit more about some of these newer sectors, AI, EVs, renewables.
Yes. So look, there are these sectors, which we are all talking about. India was the largest beneficiary of AI-led FDI in the world last year. A lot of people don't realize that. So we are really in the forefront of this. We want to become a regional hub in green hydrogen. We are trying to develop our own EVs ecosystem right now, more in the two-wheeler space. We are pushing hard, on all kinds of renewables, solar panels. So a lot of these futuristic sectors are some of the priority sectors in the economy as well. But I think taking a step back, what's also important is the partners we are working with. Who are the people, who are the countries who are putting money into India? And there we are seeing a big rise from Middle East and the US. So FDI from the Middle East has been growing at about 60% CAGR in the last 4 years. From the US has been growing at about 45 to 50% CAGR in the last few years. We're also seeing renewed interest from sovereign wealth funds. For instance, we dial back to COP26 a couple of months ago. The Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, they had this huge intentions of investment into renewables, and India was one of their key focus. So we are seeing new partners, Middle East, US, and Abu Dhabi. So all of this is a great story, but it is not that simple. India will have to prepare itself to be able to receive these inflows. In the past, we've seen whenever we've seen big inflows, it's happened in just one or two sectors. India is very capable of getting money into one or two sectors. It's very well oiled. But as soon as we try to get money into lots of different sectors, particularly new, then we do face a lot of ease of doing business issues. For example, licensing delays, regulatory issues, and so on and so forth. So if India can get that right and really make it easy for big companies to come into the economy, I think they are waiting to do so. At least that is what their intentions, are signaling.
Pranjal, are you saying that there's still a lot of policy action which is needed? Because, I mean, in terms of the FDI regulations, in terms of that entire campaign by Invest India, at least it seems like we're a lot more open to get the foreign capital. But are you saying on the ground, when you have to, let's say, set up the industries and get all those approvals, is that still a very real challenge that's concerning the foreign investment?
Well, look, in the past, we have seen that in periods when there is intentions across the board, money does not flow in a big way. So, of course, there are a lot of hiccups that happen. They probably are sector specific, country specific, and dealing with new sectors always creates some friction. My point here is that if we can be cognizant that these have been frictions in the past and can clear the space for these futuristic sectors of companies who really want to come into India, then India can actually be a big beneficiary. But we just have to work hard on it. We'll have to make sure licensing is quick. We'll have to make sure that the regulatory burden is not too bad, as in a lot of stuff happens parallelly, happens quickly. And I think if we can get that right, we have a lot to gain, because a lot of companies want to invest into India now, much more than I've seen in the past.
Talked about how we have new partners in place, the entire Middle East interest and all of that. But I also want to touch upon the manner in which the money is coming into India. Is it, more in terms of the equity investment into IPOs and the direct, capital markets? Or is it happening more at a basic level where they themselves are setting up? Or is it a lot more partnerships and tie-ups? Is there any breakup of that data available as to the nature of the flows?
So, yeah, I think all of the above. But what I find useful is breaking down FDI into digital inflows versus physical inflows. We've seen a rapid rise in both in the pandemic and a rapid drop in both after the pandemic. My sense is digital inflows are easier to explain. During the pandemic, there was a big wave of startup funding around the world, VC funding, and India also gained a lot there. But then after the pandemic, because of the interest rate environment, because of global liquidity being tight, this money actually fell for all the countries, and India was just one of them. So basically, India followed the global pattern when it comes to digital FDI. But in terms of physical FDI, it's a mystery, which we've tried to grapple with. That why is it that India's inflows for physical FDI has fallen far more than what we've seen in the FDI inflows for other countries? That has been the big problem. And that is where I looked at intentions data and I realized that it's a shifting of frontiers. We've moved away, the world has moved away from pandemic time sectors like electronics, computers, drugs, and pharma, and is now moving towards futuristic sectors like green hydrogen, EV, and AI, and all of that. So a big regime shift is happening. We'll have to be open for all kinds of money coming in, equities, direct investment, partnerships, because it's going to be all kinds. The big challenge is we have to be open for business.
Open for business, that's what we have to do. Thanks so much, Pranjul, for making time and speaking with us on this interesting topic. So FDI for now has of course fallen off the cliff, almost halved, but the big point is that the intentions are high. They are looking at partnering. We just have to beef up and open our doors for business, and then we'll see the flows coming back, because in terms of partners, we do have fresh interest from sovereign wealth funds, the Middle East countries, and a lot more to watch out for.